This video helps you describe and defend teaching strategies for the development of language for your students in your standards-based lesson plan. And it is language, either spoken or written, that really separates us from other creatures. Language as a thing, through symbols, allows us to communicate and understand each other's thoughts, emotions, creativity. And educational psychologists, because this is so tied in with learning, if not is learning, we want to know questions like, how does language develop in the first place? Does it have a space in the brain in which language can be found? Does it have to develop at a certain time in a student's life? Is it best to learn one language at a time or several languages at once? Is language created by having a thought, or is thought created when we have the use of language? So these questions will help us maximize the learning of our students, and you'll have to describe and defend the teaching strategy in which you think, that will best serve your students' language development. So if we go to step 1, where we describe the teaching strategy, and keep in mind, if you find that you're lacking in the teaching strategy or it's not specific enough, this is a great time to make it better for the greatest lesson plan ever and update those changes to your lesson plan instruction. So in step number 3 in our example, the author believes that this is going to support this language development by having them stop writing and share their best speech description with their group, either through reading directly from their free write or paraphrasing. However, the author notices the activity doesn't have instructions for the group to remind them they can speak in a language or style that best supports their cultural background. So the author is going to add in a new piece in the instruction. They can paraphrase in whatever language or style they feel most comfortable with. So if they speak in Pidgin, then that's encouraged to use. Defend why this is successful. Why will this support the language development? To get started, think about some of these things. How does your teaching strategy and lesson support students' language with varying ethnic backgrounds? How does it develop sound, pronunciation, vocabulary, meaning, grammar, syntax, awareness of language, etc.? How does it develop the language of bilingual students or emergent literacy for young children? So please review these following resources to help answer some of those questions. And from that, you can develop a defense using these resources that will support you in a research-based way that your lesson does support language development. And the basic idea here is that language, according to the Wolfbook text, represents culture and its meaning. If a student is denied to speak in the language that best represents his or her culture, then the meaning of the words spoken in the new style is not as effective because there's a processing problem. So that's the gist of that. And then you want to present this in some fashion, as we talked about before, electronically, either using some sort of multimedia or just by plain text. It's up to you, and it's valid, but I'll give you a couple examples what it might look like in multimedia. You could defend the language strategy in step 3 by finding a graph that's found on the internet showing how language vocabulary develops the more students are able to use the vocabulary in social situations, or finding a podcast of a University of Hawaii researcher that says Pidgin actually increases language development and their ability to communicate. You want to place this answer in your your standards-based lesson plan. So we'll look at the student example number 1 as a model. And we'll scroll all the way down. Notice that we have the old one for brain development, and now we'll put in the new one for language with an underline to say this is what we added in. We'll want to then scroll up, and you'll see that this new portion has been added in, which means that I'm now expanding my lesson to show that I'm supporting the language of my students. Okay, that's it. Let's move on to the next step.